everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me well. So my name's Jade, but you can call me GI Jade. Okay, hopefully you're all still awake, so it's a second to last session. So I'm going to be talking about navigating a career in Geographic Information Sciences, also known as GIS. Can I just get a quick show of hands? Who's used or done some GIS already? Okay, this is good. Who's heard of it but not done it? Who's never even heard of GIS before? Okay, this is good. Right then. So in terms of what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to do a bit of an introduction, my sort of path at university, a little bit about my career, and hopefully there'll be some little nuggets of information, even if you don't want to go down the GIS career path. And then, yeah, time for any questions at the end. So just a bit of a background to myself. So yeah, I'm a GIS technical specialist at the University of Manchester. I'm chartered with the Royal Geographic Society. I've got some pictures. I was asked to say a bit about myself. I only have 3 personalities: running, dogs, and geography and GIS. That's my dog Crumble on the left there. She's now a therapy dog. And yeah, I like running. You might see me on campus running, cycling, and then that one down the bottom is when I did my year abroad in Canada. So just a quick overview of my time at university. So I did start with geology and geography, but I'm embarrassed to admit that I did drop geology and just went to straight geography. And then I actually changed again to geography with international study. But yeah, my first year was a mixture of human and physical geography. And then the second year we got to specialise in sort of different areas within geography. So I specialised in physical geography, which included going on a really cool field trip to Morocco, which is at the bottom of the picture, also with the geologists, where we got to map go up to the Atlas Mountains and predict sort of the previous climate from glacial remains. And then in year 3, I got to study at University of British Columbia in Vancouver, where I really got to specialise in GIS. And at this stage, I still had no idea what kind of job I wanted to go into. I just kind of enjoyed geography and the field trips, and the subject is quite broad. And then when I got back, I did my dissertation looking at the impact of tourism on cave microclimates in the Peak District. And then I found at this stage that all of my course mates were sort of applying for different graduate schemes, which kind of made me feel like I should be applying for different graduate schemes. But I decided to just, at that time, just focus on university and thinking about job applications later. So in May of my final year of study, I saw a job advert for a geospatial analyst at the Ministry of Defence in London. So I actually applied for that one, and then some time later, after going through assessment centres, I got the job. I did consider doing a GIS MSc straight after, but to be honest, I just wasn't confident in doing that. I didn't think, I'd be very good at it, but I applied for the job. So yeah, so that was sort of my university sort of path. So now just moving on to my career. So I started, as I mentioned, working as a geospatial analyst at the Ministry of Defence. So that was in London in 2013, and this was centred around producing maps and aeronautical charts for the military. Yeah, I didn't really know what to expect on that very first day. I should have said that throughout university, I didn't have an internship or any sort of grad job sort of experience. I worked as a waitress. So yeah, it's all new, sort of going into that office environment, but it was very supportive as well. It wasn't just graduates who started at that time, it was also, yeah, mid-career professionals as well. So it's quite a nice environment. But then I decided to leave. I kind of wanted to move closer back up north. So I found a job at the Coal Authority. So if you're not aware of the Coal Authority, they are a government body. At the time when I worked there, it was part of the Department of Energy and Climate Change in the government. So their remit is to sort of manage the impacts of past coal mining. So in that role, it was sort of quite data focused. We actually worked with the British Geological Society to collaborate to produce mining hazard risk maps. Yeah, I went in 2016, when I should say, at this stage, I decided to do the MSc in GIS. Yeah, I felt a bit more confident by this stage. So yeah, I did that part-time whilst working full-time at the Coal Authority. And then, yeah, in 2016, you can kind of see the pattern, I'm moving slowly north. I got a job at AECON, based in sort of Manchester, Liverpool offices, as a senior GIS consultant. One of my main projects here was working with the National Grid. So we were working on something called an environmental impact assessment to build a new power transmission line from a new nuclear power station over the Isle of Anglesey, if you know it, in Wales, and then across somewhere called the Menai Straits, and then onto the mainland of Wales. I'd say, and then it was, yeah, I think 2019, I moved to a sort of similar consultancy called Arcadis, as principal GIS consultant, based in Manchester. So again, consultancy. It was, yeah, I think my role was sort of had 3 different parts to it. So one part was the technical GIS project work. A second was bidding. So for consultancies, you have to sort of go out and win the work in order to actually get to work on the project. So a lot of work went into sort of showcasing how Arcadis would be the best fit for a company who needed some consultancy services. And then the other one was line managing, and I was regional team leader. So that part of my role involved a lot of sort of recruitment, so interviewing graduates, shortlisting, looking at CVs, and then actually looking after the graduates in their first 3 years. And yeah, then back in September, September 23, came back to the University of Manchester as a GIS technical specialist. So this role is sort of, it's got sort of 2 parts to it. One part is sort of supporting students with any GIS needs in class, and then also supporting researchers as well with any GIS needs. And then on the very same day I started at the university, I started another MSc in psychology just up the road. Yeah, it's a sort of a timeline of where my career's gone. And then what I thought might be interesting is like a day in the life of a job in government, a job in consultancy, and then third, a job in higher education. Because if, like me, you haven't had that previous experience, then I feel like it's kind of an unknown. So this is just kind of typical in government. Let's say at the Ministry of Defence, I was making maps every day. My day would be quite, I'd know what was coming, if that makes sense. So I'd know I'd have 2 maps to do that day or something. So it's fairly straightforward. And then consultancy, it usually involves, looking at the team resourcing for the week ahead, saying who's busy, who's not busy, who needs work, who doesn't. And then it might be working on my own project work, different meetings, line manager one-to-ones, and then again, working on any sort of GIS applications for projects. And then now in higher education, working at the university, it's sort of a lot of support in lectures, and then also things like administration. So if you've ever used ArcGIS Online, myself and my colleague look after that. And then, so just moving on, I thought it'd be good to compare sort of the good and the less so good experiences of working across these different sectors. Obviously, these are my personal experiences and opinions, so just bear that in mind. But so working for government, I'd say you get a lot of training and development opportunities. Flexible working, which is great, almost getting every Friday off if you worked enough hours. Having informal timesheets, and then a 37-hour working week. One of the reasons that I left government was sort of the restricted scope of work. Couldn't work from home at the Ministry of Defence, understandably. Limited progression in my personal experience. And with government, there's sort of no salary negotiation, so everything's done on bands, so you'd fall within a particular band. And then going into sort of private and consultancy, the great thing there is it's a very broad scope of work. You can be looking at sort of forest fires one day, canals the next. It's really quite broad ranging. There's a lot of progression opportunities. The good thing is you can negotiate your salary. Lots of innovation, client facing, you get to go out and meet people outside of the office, which is always good. The downsides, you can work very long hours. And then timesheets. So with consultancy, you're on any projects that you're working on, your time will be billed in hours so that the company who are requiring your services can pay the appropriate amount. So sometimes that can be a little stressful if things going wrong and you need more time, but you haven't been given it. For me, I didn't have flexible time. Sometimes it can be bad to be client facing at times with the pressure. I'd also say there's workload peaks and troughs. So sometimes you might be sort of really over capacity. Sometimes you might be a little quiet. And the holidays aren't typically as good as government and higher education. That brings me to higher education. Again, it's a broad scope of work. It's only a 35-hour working week. Great holidays. There's lots of stuff you can get involved with. I guess innovation and a global reach. But then like the government, there's like limited salary negotiation again. So just some things to bear in mind when you're thinking about where you might want to work. Oh, and then that just brings me to any questions. Thank you.
Views on Pro versus desktop.
Sorry, say that again.
Pro versus desktop.
Yeah.
Your views.
Also,
other free softwares that others might be able to be involved in that would be helpful for GIS.
Yeah, sure. So I think at first I wasn't so sure about ArcGIS Pro, but now I believe ArcMap has officially been laid to rest. So it's kind of a necessity now. But yeah, the argument about sort of the commercial paid for software like the ArcGIS Pro versus something like QGIS, which is open source. I think there's places for both. I think it's really good if you're interested in a career in GIS to explore the use of both. I think the different software packages have their good points and their bad points. I think there's a lot of push to go open source, but I think Azure still has its place. Personally, they've got a really good support model. Yeah, at the same time, I like QGIS too.
Okay, thank you. So as there's no more questions, we'll move on to the final speaker of today. Thank you, Joe. Yes, so the final speaker of today, as mentioned previously, is Emma Maley from Atkins Realis.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is kind of a mishmash of stuff. So I've been introduced, and you can see on the slides, my name's Emma Maley. I'm a senior engineering geologist at Atkins Realis, and that's a charity who presented earlier, my colleague. But I want to talk a little bit more about the digital geoscience side. So, yeah. So a little bit about me, and as you've heard from other speakers, kind of like a little run through of my career so far. So I'm a geologist by trade. I did it at University of Liverpool back in the day, a few hundred years ago now, but so yeah, I graduated in 2013 and went straight on to do a master's in engineering geology because I like the idea of looking at boreholes, and I always describe it as designing foundation and bridges, but to be honest, it's mostly the ground models before that. And then I went straight from there to Atkins Realis, which I still work at, and working as an engineering geologist, doing desk studies and creating ground models, writing reports, etc. I ended up working a lot in with lots of data and in GIS in particular, and I really enjoyed that. So I thought, as part of like my career development, I was speaking to like my line manager and some other course, and I really wanted to do some more training. So I decided to do a part-time master's in geographic data science. So that is in the geography department. So not a million miles away, but still science-based. And with that, it's a lot of spatial data. So I wanted to apply it back to engineering geology and geotechnics, but at the same time, there's a lot of human geology and human geography aspects and things like that. And it's something that is very applicable, and you can kind of pivot to kind of what you want. And with that, I kind of use those skills in my job at the moment to be an engineering geologist, but include a little bit more data science in there. And then, yeah, I am also a chartered geologist as well with the Geological Society. And here's a picture of me and my colleague in front of the William Smith map at Burlington House. So yes, and just some pictures to prove I'm a geologist, and most of these are me in the field in various high vis, either in a warehouse, scheduling some rock core, pretending to look at maps and rigs with my team, and the reality is more like the one in the middle where I'm monitoring a borehole and a load of cows are watching me do that instead. So yeah, just because a picture of me at a laptop in an office isn't as exciting. So yeah, and some other things that I've done as well. So like previous speakers have mentioned, it's not just kind of doing reports and on the job stuff. You can get to do pivot a little bit more. So yeah, me and my team from at the Ground Engineering Awards in our black ties, and that was quite fun to do a little schmoozing. I've been able to present at a couple of conferences, and a lot of that stuff is based off the digital geoscience work I've been doing, so I was quite lucky. And I call myself a YouTuber now. It's one of my I have double figures. It's probably about 30 views. So if you're interested, there's a YouTube video somewhere on YouTube about artificial intelligence for geological methods. So kind of digital geoscience, I put question marks because it's so general. It can apply to so many subjects. I'm an engineering geologist, but it could be exploration, it could be resources, it could be academia, it could be anything that it's just a way of working. So why are we kind of pivoting towards more digital technologies? So data, you're going to hear about big data. There's data everywhere, and sometimes there isn't enough data. It's accessibility. So it's quite exciting. We've got all of this data and you want to do something with it. So I think, why not? If I see a large data set, I'm like, oh, let's have a little look at that. So what else? Why would you like look at digital geoscience? So I've got figure out complex problems because we have computers. So we've got the technology. Why not do something with it? When I was doing my undergraduate mapping, for example, we were still using paper maps and we might have used a GPS. And now if you're doing undergraduate mapping, you've probably got an iPad and you're using Field Move or something like that. So even in the last 15 years, the technology is advancing. So why not use that? And undergraduates are definitely going to be equipped with more digital skills. So yeah, it's only positive. And I say visualizations are nice to look at because people love pictures. So I'm always drawn to something more visual. And if you can communicate what you're doing with visuals, the better. And digital skills are transferable across disciplines. It's only going to lead to employability. Employers now are more keen if you've got skills in coding, Python, GIS. These are key because a lot of these are transferable, and also there's lots of ways to go with it. It gives you a lot of flexibility, especially in GIS and Python, for example. You can do like plugins in QGIS that do little tricks and things for you and make your job easier, and it's all about efficiency. So I've put the digital toolbox on here. So a lot of the tools you might see on the left-hand side are things that you might be using versus like the data inputs that you'll be putting into it and considering on the other side. So you've got data inputs, you've got vector and raster files from BGFs, LiDAR data that's come up quite a lot, 3D modeling software that it'll include things like boreholes, AGS data. Like I said, I've got Esri and QGIS on there because open source. I'm a keen open source person, but again, I do like the Esri Arc Pro suite. One of the questions from before. But yeah, you're still going to have the old-fashioned stuff in reports, like historical reports, and that's part of your job is to analyze data, is to go through and find out what is applicable and what's not. And that is where in like digital data science, that's your job, is the domain expertise. So in data science, you've got it's a combination of computer science, statistics, and domain expertise. So don't discount that domain expertise in that part. So a little bit of a case study from my master's project. So I've got about machine learning. So I know AI was thrown out before. So machine learning, if you've not heard of machine learning, it is just a type of artificial intelligence. So I wanted to apply machine learning to geohazards. So I picked sinkholes and I wanted to use machine learning to see if I can predict the occurrence of sinkholes, because I thought that might be useful. Because as an engineering geologist, you're likely to go out and do some field work. And if you've got kilometers of square kilometers of area to cover, then it might be a good idea if you have some kind of reconnaissance tool to really target in on what you want to go and see. Or you can use it as maybe like mapping exercise and maybe risk those areas. So high risk or low risk. So there's lots of different applications. So the area I chose is in South Wales. It's in the interstratal karst region, just north of the South Wales coalfields. And there are a lot of these features, collapse doylines. I never know if I'm going to say that right, by the way. So, and these features are formed by the collapse of the Carboniferous limestone underneath, and they form quite large shifts, expressions that are really nice to be picked up on LiDAR data. And these depressions can be really big. So I thought if we can look at LiDAR, then ideally we've got all these depressions that we can look at. Let's see what's going on. But how do we actually know which are depressions formed by sinkholes or which are just general depressions that could be caused by something else? So as part of a study, you kind of have to decide what data you're going to input. So my data sets is like my list of variables, which will include lots of different, so it'll be geology, bedrock, superficial thickness, also the morphology of the sinkholes, which I created. So I created a data set of depressions using Python code, so delineated some little areas where you can see on the top right hand side. So those depressions are delineated from using a Python code. So the depth and the shape and size is based off that. And then other factors as well that like we know will form sinkholes, like the underground cave system and groundwater. So with machine learning, this particular algorithm, so this is a supervised machine learning model. So for supervised machine learning, you need a known data set. So if I've got a data set that I've created of these depressions, that is 184,000 depressions, I need something to compare that to that is known depressions. So the map at the bottom is an extract from a paper from like 1974 where someone has mapped these in the field, and then I know where they are and I can compare them to the data sets and the depressions from the LiDAR data. So that's a bit of a cross-reference. So in GIS, I would cross-reference the georeferenced image at the bottom with the delineated depressions at the top. That's why they're the same shape as the top. So this is my data set. It is ginormous. And there's not a lot you can do with this. So this is depressions of all types. As you can see, there are lots in the blue area. If you're familiar with geological maps from the BGS, yeah, it's going to be limestone. And then the millstone grit next to it. But there are also areas around like industrial areas where you can see that there's depressions as well. So that might be associated with those land uses instead. So I have to figure out which ones are actual sinkholes and then which ones are other depressions. So then this is my data set of my known depressions. So you can see from the other one, there are a lot more. You can see the spatial pattern is a lot more at the base of the like at the contact between like the millstone grit and the limestone. And then this is then I've created, in order to run the model, I needed to merge the data set and select some because of how the model works. So I've got some known ones and then some ones that I know definitely aren't depressions because they're outside the area. So then that's how I run the model and that's the data that I'd use on it. So then if you've got great eyesight, you might be able to see the difference between this green and red, not very inclusive, apologies. But that's the, if it is yes or no for a sinkhole. So that's run on fresh data, and that's how you do your model. You have your model with your known data, and then in order to prove that it works, you have to run it on fresh data. So yeah, there's some successes and some not, but that is how you work out how successful your machine learning model is, the amount of true positives, true negatives versus false positives and false negatives. You get different numbers for that, but didn't include them all. But if you are interested, the best performing model was the random forest model, if you're familiar with machine learning. And I particularly like that type because, yeah, it's good for, you can pick different levels of feature importance. So yeah, I just thought I'd give some more pictures because it's the end of the day. So yeah, you don't want me waffling on, but again, this is a little snapshot from GIS. This is a project I was working on for a water company that was doing kilometres of pipeline. And I say kilometres, it's like Lincolnshire to Essex. And as part of that, we were doing some geomorph mapping, and like you've heard from the talks earlier, as part of that, we need GIS, and we'd use that in order to create loads of different layers, and we use that to target our ground investigation. So you can see that there are some squares where there are trial pits and boreholes, and they're targeted at the specific areas that coincide with like dodgy geology that we want to target, as well as different terrain. I'm not a geoenvironmental scientist, but I thought in case somebody is and they want to see, this is again on the same project where you'd look at through a geoenvironmental scientist would look at their maps and get polygons with potential sources, contaminated land uses, like this is a landfill, for example. So they'd identify these with their historical maps and GIS. Then they would apply classification and decide whether it is like risky enough and they want to include it based off the receptors and the how it would affect the pipeline, etc. And then they can decide the level of risk or not. And then this is the type of thing that is again on GIS platform. So it's a little bit different to just straight kind of engineering geology. So I want to just include this because I thought it was cool. If it works, a little fly through. So this is part of like the communication. So this is on one of the pipelines that this is superficial geology, that why there's some gaps overlaid on some LiDAR data to give a bit of aspect of terrain. And this can be used to communicate not just to clients, but other members of the team who might be civil engineers who wouldn't necessarily be super familiar with the geology. So you kind of want to be like, okay, we need to do this in this area, or this is alongside sideline ground and this particular geology would make it suitable. Can we reroute, etc. So as part of communication, it's not just clients, etc. It can be to other people, and things like these little visuals that you make. This was just made in QGIS in their 3D version, really quick and easy, very nice, and I think it looks quite effective. Yeah, again, this is a 3D model from the initial where I got those pictures at the beginning, and these are borehole sticks with different classifications of rock mass classification levels, and the planes that we've got are faults and intrusions, and you can see where those interact with each other, and where if there's some risky fault planes, you might want to change the layout of some things or not put your excavation in certain areas. So there's some things to consider there. There's some discs. So this is the level of certainty. So where we are pretty certain and we can generalize, we might put a large plane. Where we are less certain, we might put just a smaller disc. And that is all about using your judgment as a geoscientist to figure out how you're going to communicate that level of risk, put it in. And also you're going to remember as well, a lot of things like faults and stuff like that aren't necessarily simple planes, they are complex things, but how you decide the level of detail is using your geological knowledge or geoscientific knowledge to decide that, and how you communicate it. So that is part of it. And just a little plug, obviously I work for Atkins Realis. We have some summer placements that are paid, usually about 8 weeks. The deadline for them for next year is yeah, 5th of December 2024, there's a QR code. Usually if you try and Google it, early Atkins early careers, and there are also other graduate programs, not just engineering geology, but environmental science, that take earth science degrees, geology, etc., as well as geospatial, throughout in a different department to us, but these are jobs that we interact with various geoscientists, like GIS specialists and environmental scientists. So yeah, it's not just engineering geology, even though I'm an engineering geologist. Lots of different careers you can go. I think that's the end of my slide. So if there's any, I think, yeah, I'll leave that up in case. Thank you for safely ending.
Thank you so much. Has anyone got any questions?
No.
No, we've all left you speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of your output, talked about